Here's what's coming today on the Woodworking Network podcast.
So if you bid 10 and you sell 5, that means that your close ratio is 50%. You keep raising your price until your close ratio drops 10 points. Then you know that theoretically that's your upper limit. And then from there you can make a decision. Because sometimes having a lower close ratio with a higher profit margin gives you more profit at the end of the year.
Welcome to this episode of the Woodworking Network podcast. Join us as we explore the business of woodworking, big and small, and what it takes to succeed. I'm Will Sampson. Today's episode is sponsored by FDMC Magazine. Today my guest is Tim Coleman, a longtime veteran of the closets and organized storage industry and currently working as a business consultant. But first I want to talk about taking care of business. The sad truth about woodworkers is that an awful lot of them should have stayed as amateurs and not tried to make a business out of a craft they loved. The word amateur literally means for the love of it. But when you try to turn something you love to do into something that will support you and your family, it's very easy to suck the pleasure out of what you are doing. That is, unless you learn to love the business side too. That's hard for many woodworkers who delight in craftsmanship and the joy of creation, but disdain the monetary side of their vocation as something base and unbecoming of the artist. They remind me of a science fiction writer, Robert Heinlein, his popular character who would not die, Lazarus Long, who once said, "Writing is not necessarily something to be ashamed of, but do it in private and wash your hands afterwards." Business should be seen as just another skill you have to learn to be successful as a professional woodworker. Think of it as taking on a large and particularly challenging woodworking project. Maybe the project requires special techniques or materials. Maybe it requires tools you don't have or skills you have not learned. What do? You either learn the skills yourself and acquire the necessary tools, or you subcontract to someone else who already has the expertise and equipment to help you complete the project. That's exactly what the business side of your operation is. Either learn the skills and acquire the tools for business success, or hire a business manager who can do that for you while you concentrate on the craft. If you are using finances as a measure of success, as all real businesses must do, in my experience, the most successful woodworking businesses fall into two camps. In one camp, a business expert from outside woodworking takes over a woodworking business and applies proven business strategies to make the business successful. In the other case, the woodworker who founded the business learns to embrace the business side of the operation and achieves as much personal joy out of the business success as from the act of making beautiful things. There is also a component of self-worth involved. Too many woodworkers don't seem to value themselves or their work as highly as they should. They are too quick to lower prices to make a sale rather than finding customers to pay their price. They have trouble seeing the value of their work as perceived by their customers. That leaves them shortchanged. Woodworkers and their families deserve a fulfilling life with a comfortable income and humane hours. That only comes from embracing the skill of business. I want to get to our interview with Tim Coleman, but first a word from our sponsor. FDMC Magazine is your vital source of information to improve your woodworking business, whether it is keeping you apprised of the latest advances in manufacturing, helping you improve efficiency with lean manufacturing guru Brad Cairns, or inspiring you with case histories about successful businesses and best practices. FDMC Magazine is there to be the sharpest business tool in your shop. Learn more and subscribe for free at woodworkingnetwork.com/FDMC. Now let's talk with Tim. My guest today is Tim Coleman, a longtime veteran of the closets and organized storage industry and currently working as a business consultant. Welcome to the Woodworking Network podcast, Tim.
Hey, thank you, Will. It's good to be here.
Well, I've listened to a number of your talks and read your columns in Closets and Organized Storage magazine, and I really appreciate your pragmatic business advice for the woodworking industry. Why do you think it is that so many owners and managers of closet and cabinet manufacturing operations, particularly the small to medium-sized ones, have so much difficulty with the business side of their operations?
Yeah. I over the years, and I've been doing this now since 1988. I got into the business because I liked organizing. That's why I got into the business. And I think that most people that get into any business, whether it's in the woodworking industry or it's being an auto mechanic, they get into it because they enjoy that work. In the woodworking industry, they might enjoy the design aspect or working with a customer to develop a solution. I think that there are other people that might enjoy working in the shop and they're the craftsmen, but very few people go into business because of the business. So the business side of things, what I call administration and finance, that side of the business is always an afterthought. That side of the business is what you have to do to file your taxes or what you have to do for the accountant. And
What do
they
you have to do to make money?
but surprisingly, and Will, I'm sure you know this from all of your years working with woodworkers, that their definition is the profit is what's left after I got the job done, rather than the forethought of I'm planning to have profit when the
Right,
job is done.
right.
And so we all are forced into an area of business that is not our natural forte. It's not our natural like or want. It's a necessity. And so therefore we always push it off. It's like the honeydew list at home that gets longer and longer. You do the things that you like, and the things that you don't like, you might, delay and wait on. And that's the sad part of it. It took me a long time and many years and many mistakes before I started to embrace and understand that there's those three areas of business. There's the sales and marketing side, there's the production and operation side, and there's administration and finance. And the administration and finance, I didn't want to deal with. I mean, how many times have you heard of an employee? You need an employee, you need to hire help. And the joke is, well, I just need to hire a warm body with a heartbeat. And
Yeah.
right. And that's not the right answer.
No, no, no. Well, in fact, I've found that there's a lot of shops. I think it's typically when the shop gets to about four employees, where the owner is working in the shop along with everybody else, and they realize they can't manage the shop and the front office at the same time with that many employees. And so they've either got to stay in the shop and hire a business manager, or they've got to, move into the front office and hire a foreman in the shop. And there's a lot of shops that never can get past that point, and so they just stay that size.
Well,
Um,
and the talk that you introduced me on at the last COSIC conference was exactly that: how to avoid the black hole. And you're either gonna, if you want to grow your business to whatever dollar amount, you either have to hire help to get you there, or you have to let go of some of those responsibilities. And usually people hire help and the owner ends up being on the administration and finance side, and that's not their passion, that's not their love, and they don't do it well. They do it poorly because they don't know how, and they would be better off hiring a manager. So I used to tease with a builder that I had, and he would always give stuff away. Like by the time I got there, the drywall was up, the trim was up. By the time I got there for the closets, and so he had given away so many different things, whether it was, well, I didn't want to charge him for this, and I didn't want to charge him for that extra outlet because I knew that the kids needed it. And I used to tease him and say, I would be better off if you ran my business and I ran your business, because I wouldn't be emotionally invested. I would just be like, well, this is what we got to do to make a profit. And there's truth in that if you don't know, you don't get emotionally drawn away from the customer or the project. Like a woodworker might say, well, I'm going to put I'll run another sanding coat, or I'm going to put another finish on because it's the right thing to do. It'll look better. But the homeowner didn't pay for that. And that's not the way you bid the job. You bid the job with 3 coats or 3 sandings. And all of a sudden you're like, yeah, but it needs one more. Well, who paid for that? And in truth, you paid for that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. What's the most important thing that a shop owner can do to improve their business skills short of hiring a separate business manager?
Well, Will, what you are doing with Woodworking Network and what you're doing with your podcasts and the video channel, it's all about education. If a person is serious about a business and is serious about making a profit, to be able to pay for their family, to be able to pay for their mortgage, to be able to feed and clothe their children, to be able to buy a vehicle or send their kids to school, if they're serious about it, not only do they have to learn the best techniques for using tools, but they need to learn the best techniques for running a business. And it's all about education. I used to subscribe to a number of magazines, and I would read those like I would a textbook. I would read the table of contents. I would circle the articles, and I would say, I need to read this before the next issue comes out. I would take classes at the local community college, but I didn't need to do that. I could do the workshops and the seminars where you pay money and you go to a hotel and there's a meeting room. Well, nowadays there's so much education on the internet. You could YouTube anything, from how to use Microsoft Excel, how to create a budget, how to use Microsoft Word. There's so many tools from an education standpoint. And when you think about the different conferences that Woodworking Network puts on or sponsors, the education is vast. The problem is that you're always preaching to the choir. The people that are doing the education, that are learning and understanding, they're the ones that are already invested. It's the ones that all the shops across the country that aren't learning and aren't doing anything better. They're the ones that need the help the most. And that's
I always get concerned when I talk to somebody about like attending workshops or conferences or trade shows, and they say, "Oh, I'm too busy in the shop to do that," and too busy to make money, too busy to learn what you're doing right or wrong.
That is so true. I mean, and the investment of time. I mean, the Closet and Wood show that we just had in June in Florida. It was Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. It's 3 days. And I like that schedule because on Monday, it's, how do you get the guys going in the shop? How do you get the guys going out in the field? That's Monday, because you know your schedule for the week to be able to plan it all out. So by Wednesday, everything's settled in. And then, you could come back to the shop on Saturday and get caught up, or you could wait till Monday. But you got to get the people to go that need it, and they're the ones that don't even bother to pay attention to anything. And I don't know how to fix that.
Yeah, it's an awareness thing. Now, you've got a great track record in business success. Do you have any formal business training, or did you get your MBA on the street, as they say?
Yeah, it was literally just all going to different classes, going to different workshops, going to seminars. I mean, one of the articles that I wrote was how to create a board of advisors. I realized I just didn't know anything. So I asked some customers, I asked some friends that had skills in areas I didn't. I was very open and humble to learning and trying to understand. Whether you are in the wood shop industry or you're an auto mechanic, you're doing the same thing. You're bidding work, you're doing the work, and you're collecting the money. I mean, we all do the same thing. Our industry, though, if you buy a board or you buy a piece of laminate for a closet, that does not go stale. That does not go out of style necessarily. If you're in a food industry, it's much scarier because, like, if you're a restaurant and you buy food, it's going to go bad in 2 days, so you got to throw it away. Our industry, we do have the ability, and my suspicion would be we have way more inventory than we need to. I mean, I know how much inventory I had. Oh, it was like $126,000 of inventory. And I'm like, 120, that's my money on the shelf. $126,000 is sitting there. And do I really need that? But, you know,
Well, and then there's the other thing, because the stuff is less perishable than other products. There's the guys that keep all the offcuts and, oh, this is too big of a part to throw away. And I've been in shops where they're drowning in their waste.
oh,
And though I'm gonna you need that someday, I think in all the hundreds of shops I visited, the only shop I ever met that actually had a serious way to handle that was a countertop shop in Houston, and they had actually a computer software program that inventoried all of their offcuts and the style of the material, and which kind of corian it was or whatever. And so if they needed an odd part, they could immediately locate it. But I still wonder how often that actually happened, because styles change and you know
so there's a theory called 80-20. And I don't know if you've ever heard of the theory 80-20, but the concept is 20% of your problems come from, 80% of your problems come from 20% of your customers.
I've heard that
80%,
from the income side.
yeah,
That
right. 80% of your
income
sales
comes
from
from
20%
20%
of
of
your
your
inventory,
customers. Yeah.
right? And so there's a whole inventory control method where if it's true that that 80% of your profits come from 20% of your inventory, identify the 20% and that's what you keep, and then everything else gets thrown away, because the cost of adding another pallet rack to go higher or go taller to the ceiling and all of that cost is real. You know, can you get your shop size square footage down so then you could save money every month? I mean, you're paying for that square footage to store that material one way or the other.
Now, when you work with a business as a consultant, how do you go about analyzing a business? What key measures do you look for?
So I always start with, and you've seen my magic numbers presentation. I always start with the magic numbers presentation because it becomes an eye opener. But the key is always we have to speak the same language. And the best example of the same language that I could give is a sale. So when I had my business, I would always track how much I sold this week. I want to know, what did I sell? Well, there's a difference between what you sell and what you invoice. Because when you talk to your accountant or you report your income to the IRS on your income tax, it's not necessarily what you sold, it's what you earned. What did you invoice? And there's a huge difference. So in the closet industry, most closet companies are about 6 weeks out in work. In the woodworking industry, would you say that they're closer to 10 to 12 weeks out?
Yeah, it depends on
Yeah.
the projects and the kind of
Right.
work,
But
but
10 to
yeah.
12 weeks. So then all of a sudden, if I sell, let's say that we're right now in November and I sell $100,000 this month, I'm not really going to bill that until February. So I want to be able to understand, when I'm working with a business, how do they communicate? How do they understand the numbers? If you have a shop, like in the closet industry, you could have a company that manufactures, they have their own shop, they have a CNC machine, and they have an edge bander, or they could outsource. They could buy that material from a company that sells it. Well, if I'm looking at my cost of material, the cost of material for an outsourced company is going to include all of the shop labor to make it, right? Whereas if they have a CNC machine and they have a shop operator, they might even have a CAD operator, or they have two shop operators, their cost of material is going to be much less. So do we need to add in that labor cost to make sure that we're all speaking the same language? So when I first start working with a company, I go through my magic numbers, which really isn't magic in and of itself, but it tries to put everything into, the same language, so we're all understanding. What is a sale? How much do you pay your installers? How much do you pay your designers or your salespeople? Do you pay a commission? Do you pay an hourly rate? Do you give a salary? Is if a designer is paid on sale. Like, let's say a designer sells a $10,000 job and you pay them 10%. So they're going to get $1,000. Well, do you pay them that $1,000 when they make the sale? A lot of companies do. Well, okay. But if you're 10 to 12 weeks out and that salesperson sells every single week, how much money are you going to be out on that salesperson's commission before you're able to collect your money? And so it's the first step is always, let's get all on the same playing field. What language are we using? What are the tools that we're using and understanding to be able to understand where our profit is in the whole grand scheme of things?
And where the cash flow is, that seems to be the key issue in that kind of a calculation.
Oh, especially like if you're a wood shop and you deal with commercial builders, like let's say you're building a restaurant, or you're building a hotel, what's you're going to have to give them accounts receivable. You're going to have to hold that invoice and they'll pay you in 30, 60, or 90 days.
Absolutely. If you're lucky.
Right. Well, you and I were around during the recession that we had in 2006, 7, 8, wherever
Yeah.
that was. My fear coming out of that recession, starting in 13, for me, it was 2013 is when, things started to get a little bit better. But my fear was if I got too much business, I had used so much of my own money to survive that recession that if I got too busy, I couldn't afford the material. I couldn't afford to carry the receivable, to pay the employees or buy the material. And then all of a sudden I would have to turn work down, or you got to go to your customer or your builder and say, I need a deposit, so how you manage your cash flow. And there are many businesses that are cash flow rich, but they're profit poor.
Right.
And they could be out of business. They just don't know it.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, in recent years, we've been seeing more and more cabinet shops and woodworking business exploring getting into closets. That's an area that you are really expert in. Why should those shops look at that option? What's attractive about the closet business?
So value is always a perception. I could buy a car, and a car I could buy as a Bentley or a Rolls Royce, or I could buy a Volkswagen, a Kia, a Chevrolet, a Ford. They both get you from one place to the other. The difference is in the luxury. Well, what's happened over the course of, let's say, so when I started in 1988, closet organization was not really a thing yet. Neil Balter had started California Closets earlier in the 80s, not much earlier, but earlier in the 80s. So the knowledge and understanding was not there. Nowadays, everybody knows what organized closets are. It's available at Home Depot and it's at Menards or it's at Lowe's. So most people have an understanding of what an organized closet could be. And so it started with wire shelving. The Container Store came along with adjustable track shelving called Alpha. Organized Living got involved with that. So they have an adjustable track system. Then there's the laminate. That's what California Closets really blew up with the melamine 4x8 sheets or 5x9 sheets. But now the expectation has been risen. And so now you're going to find veneered wood. You're going to find it painted or stained. You're going to see much more crown. You see way more accessories and more customization. And go to all of the different vendors at the different shows and you'll see all of those luxury features. Hayfula has leather. You could have a leather countertop. You could have a leather drawer front. So the luxury is there. And so the woodworking industry, they may not have been interested in it on the lower end, but they could certainly be interested in it on the higher end. And I think that their craftsmanship can be appreciated. And because value is not known, they could charge a better price. There's less competition in the closet arena than there is in the kitchen cabinets or the woodworking arena. Am I making sense with that?
Yeah, oh, absolutely. And I talk when I'm doing pricing workshops, I talk a lot about value. The only value that matters is the value as perceived by the customer. And there's a lot more room in the closet side for that value to go up. I sometimes criticize shops for selling cabinets and woodworking projects as if they're selling lumber and hardware. And the rejoinder I frequently hear is, "Oh, I couldn't charge that much. I wouldn't pay for it." Well, you're not your customer.
Right. Right. I had a client in Pennsylvania. We went through the magic numbers, and I said, "Well, what is your upcharge for a textured melamine material from white? What's the upcharge?" He says, "Well, I charge 10% more." I said, "Well, okay, so you charge 10% more." I go, "How much more does the material cost you than that?" He goes, "Oh, it's not much more." I go, "Okay, let's figure that out. How much is a 4x8 sheet of white melamine and how much is a 4x8 sheet of textured? Let's take a job that you just did. How many sheets do you use?" And we figured it out, 88% more. And he's charging 10% more. And that phone call I had with him, it was a Zoom call. The session I had with him was on a Friday. He says, "I've got 2 appointments tomorrow. I know one of them is going to be textured. I'm going to raise my price to 20%. And for him, emotionally, that was a big deal.
Right.
That was he was going to double his price. He was afraid of what the customer would say. So I called him on Monday and I said, "How did your appointments go on Saturday?" He said, "They didn't even flinch." I said, "Now, I'm not going to say this to hurt your feelings, but you've been given that 10% away for the last 2 years. Think about how much money you let your customers keep because you didn't know your numbers." And it's those kinds of awarenesses of how much does it really cost to be able to be fair with your customer. Nobody wants to rip a customer off, but we don't want to be ripped off either.
Right, right. Well, and you deserve to get full value for your product. And if you're giving it away or not getting the full perceived value for the product, uh, but I think that a lot of people, they just don't know what that value is. They don't know what the upper limit is. They really don't know what they do, how valued it is by their customers because they
Sure.
don't think like their customers.
Well, and everything is so custom. Everything is
Right.
customized. So how do you analyze that? Here's my advice, and it's very simple. Um, you need to first establish your baseline on how many appointments and how many designs, how many projects do I bid? So if you bid 10 and you sell five, that means that your close ratio is 50%. You keep raising your price until your close ratio drops 10 points. And when your close ratio drops 10 points, then you know that theoretically that's your upper limit. And then from there, you can make a decision. Because sometimes having a lower close ratio with a higher profit margin gives you more profit at the end of the year.
Oh, I think that's true, and I'm of the opinion that if you bid 10 jobs, you probably the sweet spot is only winning two or three, and the problem that I see is not only does it shortchange your profit to take all of those jobs at a lower number, but it also kills your opportunity value. Why do you fill up your shop schedule with jobs that you're not making very much money on? And then, if you just do those two or three jobs, then you have room in the schedule to not only deliver on time to customers and keep them happy, but also to pick up that next job that is a premium job that you're going to make a lot of money on, that you'd have to tell them, "No, I can't do it for another 6 months," and they'll go somewhere else.
And that is exactly the point that I was trying to talk about earlier, where we all have to speak the same language. We have to speak the same language in terms of what is an appointment and what is a bid and what is a sale. You know, today's world, because of the internet, we could put a really beautiful website together and we could get leads from that website. And a lot of them, those leads they'll fill the form out on the website. That form gets submitted via email. And then we reach out to the customer and we never hear back. So there's really, what's the close ratio on the lead, and then what's the close ratio on the appointment? Because you could get 10 leads that only turn into 2 appointments.
Right, right, right. So now, what do you think is the most common business mistake that you see people in this industry making?
taking jobs that they shouldn't take.
Shouldn't
And
take. Why?
well, so they could be, I'm taking a job because I need to take this job to fill my shop, to give work to my guys. Right. So that's one option. Taking jobs that you don't want to lose because you've invested so much time with that customer. There's been 12 revisions. It's a really cool project. You want to do it. But now you're so invested, you're chasing after that job and your margin is lower. So they're taking jobs that you shouldn't because the profit margin isn't where it needs to be. So it's fear-based. Let's call it fear-based. And then you're taking jobs that you shouldn't because it's not in your wheelhouse.
Right.
I had a client. This was a million years ago, and it wasn't a client. It was an opportunity. They were building a 4,000 square foot addition on their 3,500 square foot house. That 4,000 square foot addition contained a family room, a second kitchen, a master bedroom, bathroom, closet, and a child's room and child's closet. That was it in 4,000 square feet. The bathroom had a curved wall in the entry, and it looked really cool. The closet was the opposite side of that curved wall, and they wanted their shelves to go around that curve, so they wanted curved shelves. And I thought about that job. And at the time, my average sale was like $2,100, and this was going to be a $10,000 job. And I couldn't figure out how I could do that successfully that they would be happy. I didn't know, my guys didn't know how to scribe correctly. And you'd have to scribe that entire wall. And so, there was an article probably a year or two ago, and it was sometimes the best jobs are the ones you walk away from.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
that's I think the real trick or the real key is who said it best? A man must know his limitations. Know who you are, know what you're good at.
Now, if somebody realizes that they're just not cut out for the business side of the operation, how should they go about finding a good administrator or business manager?
Um, I believe firmly in talking to other small businesses. So whether it's the local clothing store, I was a member of the Chamber of Commerce. I learned a lot about these little clothing stores on Main Street because they're running a business like mine, but they have seasonal turnover, But the key for hiring help is, in my mind, A, capability, but B, compatibility. Do you get along with that other person? And do not abdicate responsibility. So Zig Ziglar used to say that you need to inspect to make sure that you get what you expect. And so if you're going to hire help to manage the business, which is fine, you want to make sure that the bank statement comes to you. You see the bank statement when it comes in, or you see the credit card receipt statement that it comes in, and then it makes sense to you. Because most small businesses that abdicate the responsibility, those are the ones that you hear about where fraud, embezzlement happens. And it happens in small, slow ways. It happens where they took $20 in petty cash because they didn't have the cash and they didn't want to go to the cash station to buy their lunch. It happens in small ways, but over the course of years, that $20 turns into $200, it turns into $2,000. And before you know it, after 8 years, they go on vacation, you find out that you've been embezzled from, and now it's $80,000, that they took. And so don't abdicate responsibility, you delegate responsibility, and you have to be understanding of what the skill set that you are weak in. If you think that you're good in everything, well, then do everything. But generally, be humble enough to say, I'm not good at this. I need to hire this. Talk to other small businesses. You could obviously give me a call. I'd be happy to talk you through it. But it's how do you feel safe? In one of the articles that I wrote, I just put the line in there that being a small business owner, sometimes one of the biggest challenges is that you feel alone. And I have gotten more comments about that one sentence because at the end of the day, we all feel alone at times. And one of the best things about the Woodworking Network is it's a network. You're not alone.
Right.
You're here to help you. If you recall, and I don't know if you remember this, but I called you about 4 or 5 years ago. I was thinking of buying a CNC machine. And you, A, took my call. B, you gave me some suggestions of the machines that you have heard about other shops buying. And then you gave me some names of who I could talk to. I did not feel alone. And I didn't know you at all.
Right.
But the network is the network.
You have to get out of your shop and and learn. Well, that's about all we've got time for today, Tim. I'm going to have you back on the podcast to talk some more. I love talking about this stuff, and I hope that it's helpful for our audience. And we'll put a link into the podcast, so folks want to talk to you directly, they can get a hold of you.
Sure. Thank you, Will. And call anytime, really.
Thank you. You take care.
Right. Bye-bye.
That's it for today. If you're looking for more of our podcasts, you can find all of them at woodworkingnetwork.com/podcasts and in popular podcast channels. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single episode. If you want to contact Tim Coleman directly, you can email him at tim.cccg@gmail.com. Thanks again to today's sponsor, FDMC Magazine. If you have a comment or topic you'd like us to explore, contact me at will.sampson@woodworkingnetwork.com. Thanks for listening.